The summons. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched 3 kilometers into the void of space, a monument to the power of the elder races. Within its gleaming walls, representatives from 247 civilizations gathered to address what they called the human problem. Ambassador Thrace Kellyan stood before the circular assembly, his worn boots a stark contrast to the polished floor beneath them. Behind him, the blue marble of Earth hung in the viewing screen, small and insignificant against the backdrop of the Orion Arm. Ambassador Kellyan, the voice of High Arbiter Zux Thale boomed through translation crystals. Humanity has occupied Federation space for precisely 23 cycles. In that time, you have refused to adopt our economic systems, declined our cultural integration programs, and most troubling, you have rejected the hierarchy of submission. Thrace folded his arms. At 47 years old, he had survived the Belt Wars, negotiated with pirate clans in the outer reaches, and once talked down a Vrexian warlord bent on conquest. He wasn't about to be intimidated by bureaucrats, no matter how ancient their civilizations. With respect, High Arbiter, we reviewed your hierarchy. It requires species to formally acknowledge the superiority of elder races and submit to your guidance in all matters of expansion, trade, and military development. Thrace paused, his gray eyes sweeping across the assembled aliens. Humanity doesn't kneel. Not to kings, not to gods, and certainly not to committees. A wave of clicking, whistling, and electronic buzzing filled the chamber, the alien equivalent of shocked gasps. The Vrexian delegate, Commander Kortrex, slammed 3 of his 4 fists on his podium. Insolence! Your species has barely left your home system. You possess no quantum-fold technology, your weapons are primitive slug throwers, and your lifespans are laughably brief. You are children playing at being adults. Thrace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Commander, my people have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. You might want to remember that. High Arbiter Zux Thale raised one of her 6 arms, calling for silence. The Colossian leader was ancient even by her species standards, her carapace bearing the scars of 1,000 political battles. Ambassador Kellyan, you misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. The Council has voted. Humanity will submit to the hierarchy, or humanity will be removed from Federation space. You have 1 standard cycle to comply. She leaned forward, her compound eyes glittering. We have eliminated 17 species who refuse to acknowledge their place. Do not become the 18th. Thrace felt the weight of 247 civilizations pressing down on him. Every delegate in that chamber represented billions of lives, technologies that seemed like magic, and military forces that could sterilize planets. Earth had 12 warships, 40 colonies, and a population that had just learned to harness fusion power. The smart move was to bow. To accept their terms. To buy time. Instead, Thrace thought of his daughter Mara studying engineering at the Mars Academy. He thought of his grandfather who had fought in the water wars and never bent to tyrants. He thought of every human who had ever looked at an impossible challenge and said, "Watch me. High Arbiter, I'll deliver your message to Earth. But I'll also deliver mine." Thrace's voice carried across the chamber. Humanity survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own worst instincts. We've died in the millions fighting for the simple right to stand upright. If you want us to kneel, you'll have to break every human spine in the galaxy. And I promise you, that's 8 billion spines. How many of yours are you willing to sacrifice trying? The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, threatened, and demanded Thrace's immediate arrest. Through it all, he stood motionless, his message delivered. As security drones moved to escort him out, Thrace caught sight of one delegate who hadn't joined the chaos. Ambassador Lyrics of the Shen Collective sat in quiet contemplation, her feline features unreadable. The Shen were warrior poets, a civilization that valued honor above all else. She met his eyes and gave the slightest nod of acknowledgement. Perhaps humanity wouldn't face this fight entirely alone. But as Thrace's shuttle departed the council chamber, heading back toward the small human embassy station, he knew war was coming. The Galactic Council had made their move, expecting humanity to fold like every other young species before them. They were about to learn their first lesson about humans. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to stay down. The Council's verdict. Commander Kortrex of the Vrexian Supremacy paced the war room with barely contained fury. His species had served as the Council's enforcement arm for 3,000 years and never, not once, had a primitive species spoken to them with such contempt. The human rejected our terms, he growled to his assembled officers. He stood before 247 civilizations and refused to submit. The Council has authorized a demonstration of force. Captain Vex Nor, his tactical officer, pulled up holographic displays of human-occupied space. 12 star systems glowed in blue, connected by thin trade routes that looked like fragile spider silk against the vastness of space. Our intelligence suggests we can cripple their military capacity with a single strike, Vex Nor reported. The human colony of Archer's Hope in the Tau Ceti system. Population, 400,000. Defenses, minimal. We destroy it, and they'll understand the price of defiance. Courtrex studied the projection. Archer's Hope was a farming colony, barely defended, chosen specifically for its vulnerability. The Council wanted to send a message without provoking a prolonged conflict. A quick strike, overwhelming force, and humanity would crumble. It was, by all strategic analysis, the perfect plan. Assemble the Fifth Fleet, Courtrex ordered. 20 battlecruisers, support carriers, and drone swarms. We jumped to Tau Ceti in 6 hours. This demonstration will be remembered for 10,000 years. Meanwhile, on Earth, Thrace Kellyan stood in the underground command center known as Stratcom Central. The room buzzed with activity as military leaders, politicians, and scientists absorbed his report. They're going to hit us, General Maya Rodriguez said flatly. The head of Earth's United Defense Force was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, her left arm replaced by a cybernetic prosthetic after a tunnel collapse in the Valles Marineris. We can't match their technology. We can't match their numbers. By every metric that matters, we lose. Then we change the metrics, Thrace replied. Dr. Gene Park, Earth's leading physicist, pulled up tactical displays. Our ships are slower, our weapons have shorter range, and our shields are generations behind theirs. But we have one advantage they don't expect. We know we're outmatched and we've planned accordingly. He zoomed in on Archer's Hope. The Vrexians will choose a soft target to make their point. Somewhere visible but not strategically critical. Archer's Hope is the obvious choice. Thrace felt his stomach tighten. 400,000 people, including children who had never even seen Earth. But he kept his voice steady. Can we defend it? No, General Rodriguez said. But we can make them pay. Every colony has been equipped with Project Lazarus protocols since we joined the Federation. Hidden weapons platforms, guerrilla supplies, and something the Council's enforcers have never encountered, human stubbornness with nothing left to lose. On Archer's Hope, Governor Elena Vasquez received the encrypted warning from Earth. She was a former Marine who had retired to the frontier to run a colony of farmers, engineers, and dreamers who wanted to build something new among the stars. Now she gathered her security chiefs in the colony's command center, a repurposed cargo bay beneath the main settlement. The Vrexians are coming, she told them. Earth estimates we have 48 hours, maybe less. We can't evacuate everyone. We can't run. But we can fight, and we can make sure the whole galaxy sees what it costs to attack humanity. Marcus Webb, her head of security, was already pulling up defensive positions. At 63 he was the oldest person on the colony, a veteran of the Belt Wars who had taken the job because he thought his fighting days were over. Governor, we've got hidden weapons caches, mining explosives that can be repurposed, and about 200 people with military experience. Against a Vrexian fleet, that's nothing. No, Elena agreed. But it's not nothing if the whole galaxy is watching. Make sure every camera, every recorder, every sensor on this planet is broadcasting. If we're going down, we're taking the Council's moral authority with us. Back on the Council station, Ambassador Lyrics of the Shen Collective watched the preparations with growing unease. She had accessed Vrexian communication channels, a skill her intelligence officers excelled at, and knew what was coming. The Shen had joined the Council 500 years ago after a brutal war with the Vrexians. They understood the cost of defiance. But they also remembered what it meant to fight for honor. She opened a secure channel to Thrace Kellyan's ship, still en route to Earth. Ambassador, this is Lyrics. I cannot speak for my government, but I can offer you this. My people have analyzed human military tactics. You fight like cornered predators, unpredictable and vicious. The Vrexians expect you to surrender after the first strike. Prove them wrong and you may find you have more allies than you think. Thrace received the message hours later, a small glimmer of hope in an impossible situation. 41 hours until the Vrexian fleet arrived at Archer's Hope. 41 hours for 400,000 humans to prepare to show the galaxy what humanity meant when they said they would never kneel. The Council thought they were sending a message. They had no idea they were walking into humanity's message back. The first blow. The Vrexian Fifth Fleet emerged from quantum-fold space like a swarm of metallic predators. 20 battlecruisers, each the size of a small city, surrounded by clouds of fighter drones and support vessels. Commander Kortrex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and gazed at the small blue-green planet below. Archer's Hope. A farming colony. Insignificant in the grand scope of galactic civilization. Status report, he commanded. Scanning shows 400,000 life signs in the primary settlement. Minimal defense grid. 3 orbital platforms with outdated plasma cannons. No capital ships in system. Captain Vex nor looked up from his tactical station. Commander, this will take less than an hour. Kortrex nodded. Open all channels. I want every Federation species to witness this. Let them see what happens to those who defy the Council. On the surface of Archer's Hope, Governor Elena Vasquez watched the Vrexian fleet materialize in orbit. Around her, colonists worked frantically to move civilians to underground shelters while security teams took up positions in the surrounding hills. "They're hailing us," her communications officer reported. Elena took a breath, steadied herself and opened the channel. Kortrex's four-eyed visage filled the screen. "Governor Vasquez. I am Commander Kortrex of the Vrexian Supremacy. By order of the Galactic Council, your colony has been designated for pacification due to humanity's refusal to submit to proper authority. You have 1 standard hour to evacuate all personnel to the surface. We will then destroy your settlement from orbit." Elena looked at the Vrexian commander with calm defiance. "Commander, let me save you some time. We're not evacuating. We're not surrendering. And when this is over, the galaxy is going to remember Archer's Hope as the day the Council made a terrible mistake." Kortrex's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Brave words from a doomed colony. "Very well. Let your courage be recorded for whatever historians remember your species." The channel closed. Elena turned to her team. "Activate Lazarus Protocol. All units weapons free. And somebody make sure every camera on this planet is broadcasting." What the Vrexians didn't know, what the Council's intelligence had missed, was that every human colony had been militarized the moment Earth joined the Federation. Not with massive warships or visible defenses, but with the kind of hidden, vicious preparations that species do when they know they're the smallest fish in a very big pond. The 3 outdated orbital platforms suddenly lit up, but not with plasma cannons. They launched what appeared to be simple cargo containers, hundreds of them spreading across the orbital approach vectors. On the Eternal Dominion, alarms began blaring. "Commander, we're detecting multiple launches from the surface and orbital stations. Trajectory analysis suggests they're cargo pods? No weapon signatures." Kortrex frowned. "Some kind of desperation tactic. Destroy them before they clutter our firing solutions." The Vrexian point defense systems opened fire, lasers and kinetic weapons shredding the first wave of containers. But as they exploded, they released clouds of metallic chaff, reflective particles that scattered sensor readings and disrupted targeting systems. "A smoke screen," Vexnor reported. "Primitive but effective at close range. Adjusting sensors to compensate." That's when the real attack began. Hidden among the chaff were smaller objects, not missiles but mining drones reprogrammed with new instructions. They latched onto Vrexian fighter craft like mechanical ticks, drilling through armor with industrial-grade plasma cutters designed to bore through asteroid rock. Fighters began exploding, their pilots caught completely off guard by weapons that didn't register as weapons until they were already attached. "What is this?" Kortrex roared. "Those are mining tools." "Yes, sir," Vexnor confirmed, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. "They've weaponized civilian equipment. Our systems didn't classify them as threats because they're not military hardware." On the surface, Marcus Webb grinned as he watched the tactical displays. "That's right, you oversized bugs. Humans don't need fancy weapons. We just need enough spite and a hardware store." But the victory was brief. The Vrexian fleet adapted, their powerful shields deflecting the mining drones while battlecruisers began their bombardment. Kinetic rounds rained down on Archer's Hope, each one carrying enough force to level a city block. The colony's shield generators flared to life, civilian models designed to protect against solar radiation and micrometeorites, woefully inadequate against military ordnance. They held for exactly 47 seconds before overloading. Then the real bombardment began. The main settlement took the first hits. Buildings vaporized. Streets became craters. But the colonists had evacuated to underground bunkers, networks of tunnels that had been expanded far beyond what a normal farming colony would need. Elena watched the destruction on shaking monitors, feeling each impact like a physical blow. Hundreds were dead already, crushed when the shields failed. But thousands more huddled in the darkness below, still alive, still defiant. "Broadcast this," she ordered. "Every second. Every death. Let the galaxy see what the Council does to those who won't kneel." Across Federation space, billions watched the live feeds. They saw the massive Vrexian fleet. They saw the small human colony fighting with mining equipment and outdated shields. They saw the overwhelming firepower reducing a settlement to rubble. And in council chambers, living rooms, and military headquarters across 247 civilizations, people began to ask questions. Was this justice? Was this proportional? Was this what the Council stood for? On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Cortrex felt the first stirrings of doubt. The humans weren't surrendering. They were broadcasting their own destruction, turning their deaths into a weapon of propaganda. "Sir," Vex Nor reported, "we're receiving communications from Council headquarters. Several member species are questioning the operation." "Finish it," Cortrex ordered. "Deploy ground forces. I want confirmation that all resistance is eliminated." That's when humanity played its final card in this battle. As Vrexian dropships descended toward the shattered colony, they flew over what appeared to be farmland. Wheat fields, irrigation systems, agricultural territory. The entire valley erupted in a chain reaction of explosions. Every fuel depot, every fertilizer storage facility, every chemical cache that colonists had carefully hidden beneath their peaceful farms detonated simultaneously. The blast wave was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon, incinerating the first wave of dropships and sending a mushroom cloud into the atmosphere. Marcus Webb, watching from a fortified position in the hills, keyed his comm, "Welcome to Earth farming, you bastards. We grow food. But we also know that ammonium nitrate is a hell of an explosive." The second battle of Archer's Hope had begun. And humanity was teaching the Galactic Council its second lesson. When you corner predators, they bite back. The cost of pride. The aftermath of Archer's Hope left scars across the galaxy that no weapon could inflict. Commander Cortrex returned to the Council station with his fleet intact but his reputation shattered. What should have been a quick demonstration of power had turned into a 3-day siege that cost the Vrexians 7 battlecruisers, 42 fighters, and over 3,000 soldiers. Archer's Hope was gone. The colony had been reduced to radioactive craters. But of the 400,000 humans who had lived there, nearly 270,000 survived in the underground tunnels, still broadcasting their defiance even as the bombardment rained down. The galaxy had watched every second of it. High Arbiter Zewax Thale convened an emergency session of the Council. The crystalline chamber was packed with delegates, but the atmosphere had changed. Where before there had been smug certainty, now there was uncertainty. Fear even. "The human colony has been pacified," Cortrex reported, standing before the assembly. His forearms were rigid, his voice carefully controlled. "Resistance has been eliminated." "At what cost?" The voice belonged to Chancellor Vren of the Kaltorian Union, a species known for their calculating rationality. "Commander, you deployed 20 battlecruisers against a farming colony. Your casualty reports indicate losses equivalent to a peer-level military engagement. Against farmers." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Ambassador Lyrics of the Shen Collective rose from her seat. "I invoke the right of perspective. This council must acknowledge what occurred at Archer's Hope was not a pacification. It was a Pyrrhic victory that has cost us more in legitimacy than we gained in compliance." "Legitimacy?" Cortrex's voice dripped with contempt. "We are the Galactic Council. We have maintained order for 10,000 years. One defiant species changes nothing." "One defiant species," Lyrics countered, her feline eyes flashing, "has changed everything. 23 Federation species have lodged formal protests against the operation. Public sentiment in 67 member states has turned against the hierarchy of submission. And most importantly, humanity still refuses to kneel." Zewax Thale raised a claw for silence. "Ambassador Lyrics speaks truth. We have miscalculated. The humans are more resilient than anticipated." On Earth, Thrace Kellian stood in the ruins of Stratcom Central. A Vrexian strike had hit the facility during the Battle of Archer's Hope, killing 73 personnel including General Rodriguez. The command structure had moved to a backup location beneath the Swiss Alps. Thrace studied casualty reports with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 230,000 dead at Archer's Hope. Another 40,000 across the colonies as Vrexian raids targeted human outposts. Earth's 12 warships had been reduced to 7 in desperate delaying actions. "We're losing," Admiral Qin Zhao said bluntly. The commander of Earth's surviving fleet was a pragmatist who dealt in hard numbers. "The Vrexians have barely dented their military capacity. They can keep this up for years. We can't." "Then we change the game again," Thrace replied. Dr. Gene Park looked up from his workstation, exhausted but determined. "We've been analyzing Vrexian tactics. They're overwhelming but predictable. They rely on technological superiority and assume species will fight conventionally once the shooting starts. Every engagement follows the same pattern: show of force, bombardment, ground troops, occupation." "What if we don't let them occupy?" Thrace asked. "Scorched earth," Admiral Qin said slowly, understanding dawning. "You want to make every human world too costly to take." "Not just that." Thrace pulled up a star map showing human colonies. "We have 40 settlements across 12 systems. Most are lightly populated, specialized in resource extraction or research. If the Vrexians want to pacify humanity, they'll have to dig us out of every asteroid mine, every research station, every hab dome on every airless moon. And we make sure each one costs them." "Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale," Dr. Park breathed. "It could work, but it means accepting that we might lose everything. Every colony. Every outpost. Millions of casualties." Thrace thought of his daughter Mara. She was on Mars, working with engineering teams to retrofit mining vessels into improvised warships. When he'd last spoken to her, she told him she was proud of what he'd done at the council. "I won't kneel, Dad," she'd said. "None of us will." "We're already losing everything," Thrace said quietly. "At least this way we lose on our terms." The orders went out across human space. Operation Broken Arrow. Every colony would be fortified for guerrilla resistance. Civilians would be evacuated to hidden shelters. Resources would be destroyed rather than captured. And every human who could fight would. Meanwhile, political fractures were spreading through the council. Ambassador Lyrics secretly met with representatives from 14 other species in a secure location. The Shen had called this gathering because they recognized something the rest of the council refused to acknowledge. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a principle. "The hierarchy of submission is ancient," Lyrics told the assembled delegates. "We have all accepted it because it provided stability. But stability built on forced submission is not peace, it is merely delayed violence. The humans have exposed this truth." Chancellor Vren of the Calorians nodded slowly. "Our analysts predict 3 outcomes. 1. Humanity is exterminated, and the Council is forever associated with genocide. 2. Humanity submits but only after casualties that will make us look like butchers. 3. The Council fractures over the question of what to do with a species that will not break. "There is a 4th option," said Ambassador Tkeen of the Matherian clusters, "a jellyfish-like species known for their philosophical approach to problems. We acknowledge that the hierarchy itself is flawed. We reform." "Reform?" Another delegate scoffed. "The Vrexians will never accept." "The Vrexians," Lyrics interrupted, "have already lost this conflict. They simply haven't realized it yet. The question is whether we lose with them or whether we adapt." Back on the council station, High Arbiter Zux Thale received reports that chilled her to her ancient bones. Human raids had struck 3 Vrexian supply depots. Human hackers had infiltrated council databases and released classified documents showing the 15 species previously removed from Federation space, all of them exterminated or enslaved. The humans weren't just fighting a war. They were fighting a propaganda campaign, and they were winning. She called Commander Cortrex to her private chambers. "This cannot continue," she told him. "Every day this war proceeds we lose more allies. 23 species have filed protests. 14 have suspended their council dues. If this spreads, then we crush them faster," Cortrex insisted. "Deploy the full Vrexian armada. 500 ships. We sterilize every human world simultaneously. They cannot fight if they're dead. And when the galaxy asks why we committed genocide against a species whose only crime was refusing to submit?" Cortrex's mandibles clicked angrily. "Since when does the council answer to public opinion? Since humans started broadcasting every battle. Since they turned their deaths into martyrdom. Since they made us look like tyrants instead of peacekeepers." Zux Thale's compound eyes glittered. "You wanted to teach them a lesson about power, Commander? Instead, they're teaching the galaxy a lesson about us." As Cortrex stormed out, Zux Thale looked at the star map on her wall. Humanity's territory was tiny, barely a speck in the vastness of the galaxy. But that speck was causing cracks in a structure that had stood for 10,000 years. And cracks, if left unaddressed, had a way of bringing down even the mightiest edifices. The turning tide. 6 months after Archer's hope, the Galactic Council was fracturing. What had begun as a simple compliance action against a defiant species had metastasized into a crisis that threatened the entire Federation structure. 23 species had filed formal protests. 14 had suspended dues. And 3, the Shen Collective, the Kaltorian Union, and the Metherian clusters, had begun secret negotiations with humanity. Commander Cortrex refused to acknowledge the political disaster unfolding around him. Instead, he doubled down on military solutions. The Vrexian supremacy deployed 300 warships across human space, establishing blockades and conducting raids on any colony that showed signs of resistance. They found resistance everywhere. On Kepler 442, a mining colony of 12,000, Vrexians deployed ground forces expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found tunnels rigged with explosives, automated defenses built from industrial equipment, and miners who had trained for 6 months in guerrilla tactics. The battle lasted 3 weeks and cost the Vrexians 2 battalions. On New Havana, humans evacuated their orbital stations but left behind a gift. Automated cargo haulers reprogrammed to fly directly into Vrexian vessels at maximum velocity. The resulting collisions destroyed 7 ships before the Vrexians adapted their point defense. On Europa Station, when Vrexians breached the outer hull, they found corridors venting atmosphere, automated turrets with facial recognition that only targeted non-humans, and a population that had retreated to sealed intersections where they could survive for months. Every colony had become a fortified nightmare. "They're making us pay in blood for every meter of ground," Captain Vexnor reported to Cortrex. "Our casualty rates are 3 times projected levels. And sir, the troops are asking questions." Questions. Cortrex's voice was dangerous. About why we're fighting farmers and miners. About whether this is truly a council enforcement action or... Vexnor hesitated. "Or genocide, sir." Cortrex's 4 fists slammed onto his command console. "We are maintaining order. The humans refuse to submit to the hierarchy. This is the consequence." But even as he said it, Cortrex felt the certainty draining from his words. The Vrexian people, who had supported council enforcement for 3 millennia, were watching the broadcasts from human colonies. They were seeing children carried from rubble. They were seeing civilians fighting with tools and improvised weapons. They were seeing people who refused to surrender even when surrender was the only rational choice. It reminded some of them of the Vrexian-Shen War 5 centuries ago, when their own ancestors had fought against impossible odds. On Earth, Thrace Kellyan worked around the clock coordinating the resistance. The command center beneath the Swiss Alps had become a warren of tunnels and data centers, processing information from 40 colonies and organizing supply runs through Vrexian blockades. "We just lost Titan Station," Admiral Chin reported during their daily briefing. "They held for 18 days, but the Vrexians deployed chemical weapons in the tunnels. Everyone's dead." Thrace closed his eyes. Titan Station had been home to 23,000 people. Engineers, scientists, families who had moved there to mine Saturn's moon for resources that would never be extracted. "Make sure the broadcasts got out," he said quietly. They did. The galaxy saw Vrexians using chemical weapons against civilians. Admiral Chen's voice was bitter. "For all the good it does. The Council is still backing the Vrexians and we're still dying." "The Council is," Thrace agreed. "But individual species are starting to question. We've received encrypted communications from 17 different civilizations offering covert support. Food, medicine, intelligence. Nothing military yet, but it's a start." Dr. Jean Park pulled up holographic projections. "The Vrexians have been studying our tactics. They're adapting. Next wave of attacks will use long-range bombardment, staying out of range of our improvised defenses. They'll reduce our colonies to rubble from orbit without risking ground forces. Then we take the fight to them," Thrace said. Admiral Chen looked up sharply. "We have 7 ships left. 7 against 300 Vrexian warships and thousands more across the Federation. What fight can we possibly take to them?" Thrace pulled up a different display, not of military targets but of trade routes. The complex web of commerce that connected the Federation's member species, carrying resources, goods, and information across thousands of light years. The Council has maintained power for 10,000 years through economic integration. Species submit because they depend on Federation trade networks. But those networks have weaknesses. Thrace highlighted several junction points. "We can't fight their fleets. but we can make the cost of fighting us too high for the Council to bear. What followed was the most audacious phase of humanity's resistance: Operation Economic Collapse. Human ships, small and fast, began targeting not Vrexian military vessels but civilian infrastructure. They destroyed automated trade stations. They hacked into financial networks and corrupted data. They targeted fusion plants that powered Council installations, forcing expensive repairs and creating cascading power failures. They didn't kill civilians. Humanity's rules of engagement were strict on that point, but they made the cost of maintaining the Federation infrastructure surge exponentially. Insurance rates for trade vessels skyrocketed. Species began stockpiling resources rather than relying on Council trade networks. Financial markets fluctuated wildly as confidence in Federation stability eroded. Chancellor Vren of the Kaltorians watched the economic reports with cold calculation. His species had built their civilization on mathematical precision, and the mathematics were clear. The cost of suppressing humanity would exceed the value of their compliance within 2 years. He called a secret meeting with Thrace Kellyan. They met on a neutral station in the border territories, a smuggler haven where Council authority was thin. Vren's delegation arrived with full security, expecting tension. Instead, Thrace arrived alone, unarmed, and offered his hand in greeting. "Chancellor. Thank you for meeting with me." Vren studied the human ambassador. Thrace looked exhausted, his hair graying at the temples, his eyes carrying the weight of millions of dead. But he stood straight, unbowed. "Ambassador Kellyan. I will be direct. The Kaltorian Union believes this conflict is unsustainable. The economic damage alone will take decades to repair. The political damage to the Council's legitimacy may never heal." "Then support our independence," Thrace said simply. "It's not that simple. The hierarchy of submission is foundational to Council structure. If we allow humanity to refuse it, other species will follow. The Federation could collapse." "Chancellor, the Federation is already collapsing. You're just too invested in the structure to see it." Thrace pulled up data showing the fractures spreading through Council authority. 23 species in protest. 14 refusing to pay dues. 3 conducting secret negotiations with us. How long before that becomes 10 species? 20? 50? What are you proposing? A new framework. Not submission but partnership. Not hierarchy but cooperation between equals. Humans bring resources, innovation, and a workforce that will never stop trying to solve problems. In exchange, we gain access to technologies and knowledge that would take us centuries to develop. Thrace leaned forward. The Council can evolve or it can collapse. Those are the only options now. Vren was silent for a long moment. "If I bring this proposal to the Council, the Vrexians will call for my removal." "Probably. But the Shen, the Metharians, and 17 other species will support you. That's enough to force a vote." Thrace met the Chancellor's eyes. "History is watching this moment. The question is whether you'll be remembered as the leader who reformed the Council, or the one who stood by while it burned." The meeting ended without resolution, but a seed had been planted. Back on the Council station, High Arbiter Zyxthale was receiving similar pressure from multiple directions. The Shen Collective had formally proposed a reform of the hierarchy. The Metharians had published a philosophical treatise arguing that forced submission violated the fundamental principles of sentient dignity. Even the Vrexian population was showing signs of war exhaustion. Protests had erupted on their homeworld, families demanding to know why their soldiers were dying to enforce a principle that most of the galaxy was questioning. Commander Kortrex ignored it all. He had one goal: break human resistance through overwhelming force. He assembled the largest fleet in Vrexian history, 800 warships, and prepared for a final assault on Earth itself. If the humans wouldn't kneel, he would erase their homeworld and scatter the survivors across the galaxy as a lesson that would echo for millennia. But as his fleet prepared to depart, Kortrex received a message from High Arbiter Zyxthale. "Report to Council chambers immediately. Emergency session." The galaxy was about to decide whether humanity's defiance would lead to extermination or revolution. And the vote was far from certain. The Council divided. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in its 10,000-year history. The crystalline chamber was packed beyond capacity, with delegates standing in alcoves and observers filling every available space. Camera drones from 200 news organizations hovered overhead, broadcasting across the galaxy. Commander Kortrex stood before the assembly, his 800 warships positioned just outside Council space, waiting for authorization to strike Earth. "Members of the Council," High Arbiter Zyxthale began, her voice heavy with the weight of history, We face a decision that will define our civilization for millennia to come. The human species has refused compliance with the hierarchy of submission. They have resisted our enforcement with unexpected ferocity. And now, Commander Cortrex requests authorization to deploy overwhelming force against their homeworld. A holographic display showed Earth, blue, green, and fragile in the darkness of space. 8 billion humans lived on that world, unaware that their continued existence was being debated by ancient civilizations. The Vrexian supremacy has prepared a fleet capable of complete planetary pacification, Cortrex announced. We can end this conflict within one cycle. We can restore Council authority. We can ensure that no other species dares to question our system. By committing genocide, Ambassador Lyric said coldly, rising from her seat. The Shen warrior poet's voice carried across the chamber. Let us use the accurate term, Commander. You are asking permission to exterminate 8 billion sentient beings because they refuse to bow. They are a threat to galactic stability. No, Commander. They are a threat to your pride. Lyrics turned to address the full council. I invoke the right of historical record. Let this assembly review the truth of what has occurred. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing footage from the past 6 months. The Battle of Archer's Hope, where farmers fought battle cruisers with mining equipment. The Siege of Kepler 442, where 12,000 miners held off a Vrexian army for 3 weeks. The desperate guerrilla actions across 40 colonies, each one broadcast to the galaxy. But Lyrics also showed something else, the cost to the Federation. Economic damage in the trillions of credits. 23 species in formal protest. 3 civilizations threatening secession. Public opinion turning decisively against the Council's actions. This is what the hierarchy of submission has cost us, Lyrics continued. Not just human lives but the very legitimacy of our authority. The question before this Council is not whether humans will submit. The question is whether we will have the wisdom to evolve. Chancellor Vren of the Kaltorians stood, his mathematical mind working through the probabilities. I second Ambassador Lyrics's motion. The data is conclusive. Continued enforcement will result in either galactic civil war or complete Federation collapse within a decade. The only viable solution is reform. Reform. Cortrex's voice dripped with contempt. You would dismantle 10,000 years of order because one primitive species refuses to accept their place? No, Commander. Vren's response was ice cold. We would adapt 10,000 years of tradition because the galaxy itself is demanding it. Your proposed solution, genocide, would make us monsters in the eyes of history. Is that the legacy you want for the Vrexian people? Murmurs spread through the chamber. Delegates who had supported the enforcement action 6 months ago were now silent, reconsidering their positions. Ambassador Tkeen of the Matharian clusters floated forward, their translucent form shimmering in the chamber's light. Perhaps we have asked the wrong question. We have asked, how do we make humanity submit? When we should ask, why does submission require force? If our system is truly just, should it not be embraced voluntarily? Philosophy is a luxury, Cortrex snapped. We deal with reality. And the reality is that without the hierarchy, the Federation will fragment into chaos. Then let it, said a new voice. The entire chamber fell silent. High Arbiter Zuexthale had spoken, and her words carried the weight of her position. Perhaps, she continued slowly, Commander Cortrex is correct. Perhaps our system cannot survive contact with a species that refuses to submit. But if that is true, then our system is already dead. We simply haven't acknowledged its corpse. She turned to face the assembled council. I have led this body for 3 centuries. I have maintained the hierarchy because I believed it provided stability. But stability without justice is merely tyranny with good PR. The humans have exposed this truth. Zuexthale pulled up holographic files, the classified records of the 17 species previously removed from Federation space. The records Lyrics's intelligence officers had secretly leaked to human hackers, who had broadcast them across the galaxy. The Delcani, the Orvex, the Prynn. 17 civilizations that questioned the hierarchy. 17 civilizations we labeled as threats to stability. Her compound eyes swept the chamber. 17 genocides that we pretended never happened. Until the humans made us look at what we've become. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, demanded explanations, called for investigations. But Zuexthale raised her claws, calling for silence. Commander Cortrex, I deny your request for authorization. Your fleet will stand down. High Arbiter, I must protest. Your protest is noted and overruled. Zuexthal's voice was steel. Furthermore, I am calling for an immediate vote on the Shen proposal for reform. All delegates will vote within the next standard hour. The question, shall the hierarchy of submission be dissolved and replaced with a voluntary federation of equals? Courtrex felt the ground shifting beneath him. This is madness. Without the hierarchy we lose all authority. Species will do as they please. There will be chaos. Perhaps, Zuexthal agreed. Or perhaps we will discover that most species actually prefer cooperation to coercion. We are about to find out. On Earth, Thrace Kellyan watched the council proceedings with his remaining leadership team. Admiral Chin, Dr. Park and dozens of military and civilian leaders crowded around the displays, hardly daring to breathe. They're voting, Admiral Chin whispered. After 6 months of hell, after 300,000 dead, they're actually voting to reform. Don't celebrate yet, Thrace cautioned. Courtrex still has 800 warships. If the vote goes against reform, he won't hesitate to carry out his attack. The voting began. Each of the 247 civilizations entered their decision into the secure council network. The results would be revealed simultaneously to prevent political pressure. Thrace thought of his daughter Mara, working in the Mars shipyards to retrofit mining vessels into makeshift warships. He thought of Elena Vasquez, the governor of Archer's Hope who had died in the bombardment, her last words broadcast to the galaxy, "We die free." He thought of the 300,000 humans who had sacrificed everything to prove that some principles were worth more than survival. The vote completed. High Arbiter Zuexthal prepared to announce the results. In the council chamber, 247 civilizations waited. On Earth, 8 billion humans held their collective breath. And across the galaxy, trillions of sentient beings wondered if they were about to witness the birth of a new age or the beginning of a war that would consume everything. Zuexthal's voice echoed through the chamber. The vote is complete. 132 civilizations in favor of reform. 98 opposed. 17 abstentions. A majority. Not overwhelming but enough. The hierarchy of submission is hereby dissolved, Zuexthal announced. The Galactic Federation will be restructured as a voluntary alliance of equal civilizations. The transition will begin immediately. For a moment there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Some delegates cheered. Others protested. Still others sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Commander Courtrex stood motionless, his mandibles clicking in barely controlled fury. 10,000 years of tradition, overturned because one primitive species refused to know their place. He opened a private comm channel to his fleet. All vessels maintain position. I'm not done. In the Swiss Alps command center, Thrace felt tears running down his face. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had forced the galaxy's most powerful institution to change. But Dr. Park was staring at his tactical displays with growing alarm. Thrace, he said quietly, the Vrexian fleet isn't standing down. They're forming attack formations. The celebration died instantly. Courtrex's voice boomed across all council channels. I reject this vote. I reject this betrayal of everything the Vrexians have built. If the council will not maintain order, then the Vrexian supremacy will do so alone. 800 warships began moving toward Earth. The galaxy had voted for peace. But Commander Courtrex had chosen war. The price of freedom. 800 Vrexian warships dropped out of quantum fold space at the edge of Earth's solar system. The largest invasion force in recorded galactic history, assembled to destroy a single world. Commander Courtrex stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on his displays. Around him, his officers worked in tense silence, many uncomfortable with defying a direct council order but bound by military discipline. All vessels, battle formation Alpha. We jump to Earth orbit in 10 minutes. Courtrex's voice was calm, despite knowing he had just committed treason against the Galactic Council. Prepare for complete planetary bombardment. On Earth, Admiral Chin watched the massive fleet approaching and did the only thing she could. She ordered humanity's 7 remaining warships to intercept. 7 ships against 800. It's been an honor, she said quietly to her bridge crew. For Earth. For humanity. For every soul that refused to kneel. The human fleet accelerated toward the Vrexian armada, knowing they would last minutes at best. But minutes might be enough to evacuate a few more cities, to save a few thousand more lives. Then something impossible happened. Space rippled with quantum fold signatures as ships began arriving from across the galaxy. Not hundreds. Thousands. The Shen Collective's entire fleet, 600 warships of warrior poets who recognized honor when they saw it. The Kaltorian Union's defense forces, 400 vessels crewed by beings who valued logic over tradition. The Mytharian clusters sent 300 ships, their captains citing philosophical principles about the dignity of sentience. But it wasn't just the three species who had openly supported humanity. Ships arrived from civilizations that had voted against reform but whose military leaders refused to participate in genocide. They arrived from neutral species who had abstained from the vote but whose populations had watched the broadcast from Archer's Hope and couldn't stand by while Earth burned. In total, 27 different civilizations sent forces to defend Earth. Commander Cortrex watched his tactical displays light up with contacts and felt a cold realization settle over him. He had lost before the first shot was fired. "Sir," Captain Vexnor reported, his voice shaking, "we're receiving hails from the Shen fleet. They're demanding our surrender." "Surrender?" Cortrex's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "We are the Vrexian supremacy. We have maintained order for 3,000 years. And now," a new voice interrupted his communications, "you stand alone." Ambassador Lyrix's face appeared on his display. Behind her, the command bridge of a Shen dreadnought hummed with activity. "Commander Cortrex, I'm offering you one chance to stand down. Your fleet is outnumbered. Your government has disavowed your actions. The Council has voted against you. You have lost. I have 800 warships. And we have 3,000. More are arriving every minute." Lyrix's feline features were utterly calm. "But numbers are irrelevant. You have lost because the galaxy itself has rejected what you represent. The hierarchy of submission is dead, Commander. The only question is whether you die with it." Cortrex looked around his bridge. His officers wouldn't meet his eyes. They knew the truth. This wasn't a battle for survival or principle. This was one commander's pride against the tide of history. "All vessels," he said quietly, "stand down. Power down weapons and prepare to be boarded." The Vrexian fleet complied, their warships going dark as Council security forces moved in to take command. Commander Cortrex of the Vrexian supremacy, who had believed his species' destiny was to enforce order on a chaotic galaxy, was arrested for war crimes and treason. On Earth, Thrace Kellion stood in the command center, watching the displays show the Vrexian fleet surrendering. Around him, people were crying, laughing, hugging each other in disbelief. They had survived. Against all odds, against the most powerful military force in the galaxy, humanity had survived. "Incoming transmission," a communications officer reported. "It's everyone. Every species that came to defend us. They're requesting to speak with you, Ambassador." Thrace straightened his uniform and stepped before the camera. On displays across the command center, he saw representatives from 27 civilizations, their faces representing a dozen different types of evolution, all looking at him with something that might have been respect. Ambassador Lyrix spoke first. "Ambassador Kellion, on behalf of the Shen Collective and our allies, we welcome humanity to the Galactic Federation. Not as subjects, but as equals." Thrace felt emotions he couldn't name welling up inside him. "Ambassador Lyrix, you have our deepest gratitude. We will never forget that when humanity needed allies, 27 civilizations answered the call." "You misunderstand," Chancellor Vren interrupted, his mathematical mind cutting through sentiment. "We did not come to save you. We came to save ourselves. You showed us what we had become, what we had allowed ourselves to become. In defending you, we defend the principles we had forgotten we once valued." Ambassador Tina's translucent form shimmered. "The philosophers of my people have a saying, the tree that will not bend in the storm will break. But the tree that bends too far has already fallen. Humanity taught us to stand straight again." The transmission ended and Thrace turned to face his team. Admiral Chin, Dr. Park, and hundreds of others who had fought, planned, and sacrificed for this moment. "It's over," Admiral Chin said as if she couldn't quite believe it. "No," Thrace replied. "It's beginning. The real work starts now, building a federation that actually deserves the name." 3 months later, Thrace Kellion stood once again in the council chamber. But everything had changed. The hierarchy of submission was gone, replaced by a new charter that guaranteed the sovereignty and equality of all member species. The council itself had been restructured, with rotating leadership and mandatory reform reviews every decade. Most significantly, the 17 removed civilizations were being publicly acknowledged. The galaxy mourned species that had been erased from history, and the council formally apologized for crimes that could never be forgiven but might someday be learned from. Thrace was there for humanity's formal admission to the Federation. Not as a species seeking protection, but as equals offering partnership. High Arbiter Zwax Thale, soon to step down as part of the reforms, presided over the ceremony. Ambassador Kellyan, I have a question I must ask, though I fear the answer. If we had known how costly enforcing the hierarchy would be, we might have offered you equality from the start. Why didn't you simply accept submission, knowing you could negotiate better terms later? Thrace thought of Archer's hope. Of Elena Vasquez's last broadcast. Of 300,000 humans who died rather than kneel. Of his daughter Mara and the future she would inherit. High Arbiter, my species has a long history of learning the same lesson over and over. Sometimes we learn it through tragedy, sometimes through triumph, but we always learn it. Freedom isn't something you're given. It's something you take and defend and pay for in blood and tears. If we had submitted, even temporarily, we would have taught our children that survival is more important than dignity. That comfort is more valuable than principle. He paused, looking around the chamber at civilizations that had learned their own version of this truth. We didn't refuse to kneel because we thought we could win. We refused because we couldn't imagine teaching the next generation that kneeling was acceptable. And as it turned out, there were other species in this galaxy who remembered that same lesson. You just needed someone to remind you. Zwax Thale was silent for a long moment. Then she bowed her ancient head, not in submission but in respect. Welcome to the Federation, Ambassador. We are honored to call humanity our equals. The chamber erupted in applause, not from all delegates, the wounds were still too fresh for that, but from enough. From the Shen and the Kaltorians and the Metharians and 24 others who had chosen principle over precedent. As Thrace left the chamber, he received a message from Mars. Mara had sent a photo, the first joint human-Shen engineering project, a new class of exploration vessel designed by both species working as partners. We did it, Dad, her message read. Now let's show them what humanity can build when we're not busy fighting. Thrace smiled. The war was over. The real work, building a galaxy worthy of those who had sacrificed for it, was just beginning. And somewhere among the stars, in the tunnels of Archer's hope that had been rebuilt as a memorial, Elena Vasquez's final words were inscribed in stone for future generations to read. We die free. Let that be enough. It had been enough. It had been everything.